I never expected to return home to the chaos unfolding on my land, but there they were, a full construction crew pouring concrete, erecting a massive bridge without my consent. The HOA had always been a nuisance, slapping fines for trivial infractions and enforcing rules that seemed designed to irritate. But this was different. This wasn't about a mailbox color or an untamed lawn. This was my land. And they had marched onto it like they owned the place. Maybe they thought I'd accept it, cave into their arrogance, and let them finish their illegal project. But what they didn't realize was that they had built their precious bridge on something far more valuable than they could ever comprehend. And they were about to regret every decision they'd made. The wheels of my suitcase crunched over gravel as I stepped out of my car, fatigue weighing me down after 3 exhausting weeks abroad. My business trip had kept me away, but my property had been under constant surveillance. I had planned to return, unpack, and finally enjoy a moment of peace. But as I turned the corner onto my land, the shock hit like a punch. My peaceful, tree-lined backyard had been obliterated. Steel beams jutted into the sky, scaffolding loomed, and the clamor of construction filled the air. Jackhammers roared as workers in fluorescent vests swarmed over heavy equipment, pouring concrete into the foundation of what was clearly a massive bridge. My exhaustion dissolved into a surge of furious disbelief. Who had authorized this? My property was private, explicitly free from any HOA jurisdiction, yet here they were, tearing it apart like they had every right. I stormed toward the nearest worker, a man in a yellow hard hat. Who gave you permission to build this? He barely looked up. Just following orders. All permits approved by the HOA. That word, HOA, made my blood boil. This is my land, I snapped. Show me those permits. He reluctantly handed over a sheaf of papers. My name was nowhere. Instead, it was signed by Karen Reynolds, the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, who had apparently decided she had the power to repurpose my land for a community project. I demanded the crew stop construction. He shrugged again. Take it up with the HOA. We're paid and contracted. Behind me, an excavator roared to life, blasting dust into the air. They weren't stopping. I turned and marched back to my house, fury burning with every step. If the HOA thought they could pull this off, they were dead wrong. I hadn't even dropped my bags before dialing the HOA office. 2 rings, and then that voice, Karen Reynolds. Willow Creek Hope, Karen speaking. Karen, I snapped, why is there a construction crew building a bridge on my property? Silence. Then a smug little laugh. Oh, so you finally noticed, she said, as if this were about garden shrubs. I was wondering when you'd call. My grip on the phone tightened. This is illegal. You have no authority over my land. How did this happen? Oh, but we do, she said with that same syrupy smugness. We sent notices weeks ago. You failed to respond. Per HOA bylaws, silence equals approval. I ground my teeth. That's absurd. I never received any notice. She sighed dramatically. Well, we can't control the mail, can we? But don't worry. The bridge will raise property values and improve community access. It's for the greater good. I could barely contain myself. I don't care about the greater good. This is my land. Her tone sharpened. Actually, the HOA has jurisdiction over all community development. We had a majority vote. From people who don't own the land. I growled. That's theft. It's called democracy, she chirped. You should attend our meetings. My hand was trembling with rage. I had read every clause of my deed. There was no HOA authority over my property. This had to be illegal. Fueled by righteous anger, I grabbed my files and combed through every document, looking for loopholes. As expected, there were none. The HOA had no legal claim. This was fraud. Pure and simple. That evening, I walked into the HOA meeting like a storm. Conversations halted. Karen sat at the center, smiling like she'd already won. "Ah, Mr. Carter," she said, condescending as ever. "What a surprise. Joining us at last." I slapped the permit onto the table. "Explain this. Explain why you think you have the right to build on my land." Karen sighed, flipping through the papers with fake surprise. "As I said, the board approved it. It's a community project. Not your land to give away," I snapped. "Where's my signature?" She tapped her nails on the table. "You had 30 days to object. You didn't. Because I never got the notice." "Not our fault," she said coolly. "Maybe you should update your address." The smugness was unbearable. The other board members looked away, afraid to challenge her. I took a breath. "This isn't over," I warned. "That bridge is illegal, and every one of you will regret this." Karen leaned in, her grin widening. "You seem tense, Mr. Carter. Maybe a walk across our new bridge will help." I turned and stormed out, rage pulsing through every step. But beneath the fury, something else was stirring. Karen had no idea what she'd unleashed. She thought she trapped me, humiliated me. But I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to turn the tables. Because I had just found something that could destroy her plan completely. And by the time I was done, the HOA would be the ones begging. I didn't sleep that night. The nerve of them, claiming authority they didn't have, forging approvals, trampling over my rights. But more than the fury, it was the gnawing suspicion that kept me up. Karen's smug confidence wasn't just about control. There was something more. Something she was hiding. So as midnight struck, I sat alone at my desk, surrounded by stacks of deeds, maps, and zoning records, digging deeper into a conspiracy far worse than I had ever imagined. Determined to uncover what the HOA was really hiding, I buried myself in documents, scanning through pages of legal jargon, zoning maps, and community records, hoping to find even the smallest clause that might explain how they had managed this blatant land grab. But no matter how deep I dug, the result was the same: my property was private, untouched by HOA jurisdiction, and protected under zoning laws that had been in place since the early 90s. There was no legal path that gave them the authority to construct anything, much less a massive bridge, on my land. Yet somehow, permits had been issued, construction had begun, and there were signatures, mine included. Fake ones. Someone had forged an entire paper trail, meticulously crafted to look legitimate, and that meant one thing: someone had committed fraud. Serious, prosecutable, deliberate fraud. By the time the sun came up, I had compiled enough evidence to make a very loud noise in court: trespassing, forgery, and 3 blatant violations of state property law, but I needed more than just the surface-level facts. I needed to understand who was behind the forgery, and more importantly, what their real motivation was. So I called my lawyer, David Monroe, a bulldog of a real estate attorney who had made a name for himself by taking down shady HOAs across the state. I laid out the situation as plainly and calmly as I could, though my heart was pounding through my chest. There was a long pause on the other end of the phone before David spoke. "If what you're telling me is accurate, Carter, this isn't a simple violation, this is felony-level fraud. Send me everything. I'll start reviewing county records within the hour." That reassurance gave me a spark of momentum. I had already scanned every permit, every deed, every boundary map I owned that proved my land was exempt from HOA control, but I wasn't about to sit around while David went through public records. I needed to see it for myself, and I needed answers now. So I threw on a jacket and drove straight to the county zoning office. The clerk, a woman in her late 50s with heavy bags under her eyes and a glazed-over look like she hadn't had a lunch break in a year, took my documents without much interest. "I need to verify the zoning status on this property," I said, trying to keep my frustration from bleeding into my voice. She typed my address into the county system, blinked at the screen, then said flatly, "Lot 47B, zoned as private land. Exempt from HOA oversight since 1992. I leaned in, hopeful. Then how did they get a permit to build a bridge? Her brow furrowed slightly as she clicked around the screen. It says here the permit was issued under a community development expansion. Approved by the HOA. And signed off, by you. My stomach dropped like a stone. That's not possible, I said. I never signed anything. She turned her screen toward me, and there it was, my name in thick, printed ink at the bottom of a construction authorization form I had never seen in my life. My signature, forged in perfect imitation. My pulse pounded in my ears. Who submitted this form? I asked tightly. She pulled up a new screen, her frown deepening. Looks like it came through a third-party development group. Silver Lake Holdings. The name hit me like a punch to the chest. I pulled out my phone and typed it into a search bar. Within seconds, I was staring at the homepage of a development firm infamous for working with shady HOAs across the country. Their playbook was always the same: disguise land grabs as community projects, get HOA boards to sign off, then develop the seized land into high-end luxury homes, without the original owner's consent. But the worst part wasn't their reputation. It was the name at the bottom of the corporate directory. Richard Reynolds, CEO. Karen Reynolds' husband. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. This wasn't just an HOA being overzealous with its power. This was a coordinated operation. They had never intended to build this bridge for the benefit of the community. The bridge was merely a gateway, a literal road leading directly to an undeveloped tract of land just beyond my property where a luxury housing project was already being planned. And my land? My land was the missing piece. Without access through my property, the entire housing development was legally and logistically impossible. That's why Karen had forged my signature. That's why the HOA pushed the project through. They weren't just trespassing, they were trying to turn my backyard into a multi-million-dollar gold mine. For them. I drove straight to the county records office and requested all proposals filed within the past year for infrastructure projects in my area. I spent hours combing through a sea of paperwork, flipping through pages of proposals, until finally, I found it. Buried beneath layers of bureaucratic filings was a development blueprint titled Willow Creek South Expansion Plan, an upscale residential project featuring townhomes, private access roads, and a community clubhouse. And there, in the corner of the diagram, was a newly constructed bridge connected directly to a narrow strip of land labeled Future Access Path. That path was my backyard. They had built the bridge to make their development viable. My private property had been turned into their cornerstone, their gateway, their golden ticket. And they thought I wouldn't notice. By the time I left the zoning office, I had every document I needed to legally charge them with fraud, trespassing, and illegal land use. But I wasn't going to report them just yet. Not because I didn't want to, but because now I saw a greater opportunity. I wasn't just sitting on valuable land. I was sitting on a linchpin, an asset that both the HOA and the county had been eyeing for years. That's when I made one final stop. I visited a private real estate consultant who specialized in strategic land acquisitions and government infrastructure deals. When I laid out the property, the zoning, and the recent developments, his eyes widened. "This isn't just a bridge," he said, leaning over the table. "Your land is part of a regional corridor the county's been trying to buy for over a decade. With this structure in place, illegally, mind you, they've made your property indispensable. The HOA's not the only one who needs it. The county wants it too. You've got leverage. Serious leverage." I walked out of that office with a plan already forming in my mind. I wasn't just going to stop the HOA, I was going to let them keep going. Let them build. Let them pour every ounce of funding and ambition into a project that wasn't legally theirs to begin with. Let them break every rule they thought they could bend. The more they built, the worse their legal position became. So instead of filing a lawsuit or calling law enforcement, I did the one thing Karen and her little army of HOA cronies would never expect: I let them build. I let them pour concrete, erect scaffolding, lay down steel, and expand the project in every direction, all while I documented every step. I installed high-resolution security cameras across my property, including one with a perfect view of the bridge site. Every morning, I watched as workers trespassed onto my land, as board members arrived in their SUVs to inspect their progress, completely oblivious that every moment was being recorded. Karen, drunk on power, made no effort to hide what she was doing. At every HOA meeting, she bragged about her bridge, calling it the jewel of Willow Creek, promising that it would increase property values and transform the community. She pushed for more funding, landscaping, decorative lighting, picnic tables, and even a pedestrian park. And her loyal board of yes men, too timid to oppose her, approved every request. Thousands of dollars vanished into a fantasy built on lies. And I sat silently at the back of those meetings, nodding along, taking notes, keeping up appearances. But behind the scenes, I was constructing a case so airtight it would bury them. I compiled photos of my untouched property from before the construction. I gathered digital timestamps from my cameras showing every inch of illegal activity. I cataloged every forged document, every fake permit, every forged signature. And then I went one step further: I hired a private investigator to dig into Silver Lake Holdings. What he uncovered made my stomach turn. Silver Lake had a pattern, a national history of. The deeper I dug, the darker it got. Silver Lake Holdings wasn't just any shady developer, they were experts in collusion, professionals at quietly partnering with corrupt HOA boards to seize land under fraudulent conditions. Their blueprint was painfully consistent: push illegal projects through with fake permits, forge homeowner signatures, and leverage bogus approvals from complicit board members. Then, once the infrastructure was in place, they'd flip the properties for massive profits, laughing all the way to the bank. And at the helm of it all was Richard Reynolds, Karen's husband, the very same Richard whose name kept surfacing in legal filings across the state. He had been implicated in multiple lawsuits for the exact same tactics: zoning manipulation, forgery, and illegal development deals disguised as community upgrades. But every single time, just before a case would go to trial, it would quietly disappear. Witnesses recanted, judges ruled unexpectedly, and local officials looked the other way. The reason became obvious: Reynolds had powerful connections, and he knew exactly how to pull strings behind the curtain. Armed with this knowledge, I shifted strategies. No more playing defense. I started making my own moves, quietly, carefully. I reconnected with my real estate consultant, the one who had initially flagged the value of my land. Together, we initiated a series of evaluations and consultations with the county. What we discovered shocked me. Because of the property's location, its proximity to a future public transit corridor, and its direct adjacency to a proposed infrastructure expansion project, the land had tripled in potential value. The county had apparently been eyeing my lot for years, but since it was never available for sale, and since I had refused to join the HOA, they couldn't touch it. Now, thanks to the bridge, my land had become a critical junction. A linchpin in the county's infrastructure map. And the irony? It was the HOA itself that had driven up the price with every inch of concrete and every bolt of steel they had illegally installed. Their shortcut to luxury development had turned my private backyard into the most valuable parcel in the entire neighborhood. And I held the deed. Meanwhile, back at Willow Creek, construction was accelerating at a breakneck pace. Karen, desperate to complete her golden bridge before anyone could halt her, began pushing the workers with unrealistic deadlines. Crews worked from dawn to dusk, laying steel foundation, welding railing supports, pouring concrete platforms, and installing decorative lighting along the soon-to-be pedestrian entrance. Sidewalks were carved out of the ground like arteries leading directly to the bridge, and landscaping crews began shaping the area into what looked like a municipal park. Trees were planted, benches installed. It was, on the surface, a marvel. The neighborhood buzzed with anticipation. Homeowners believed they were watching history unfold, a bold new addition that would forever elevate property values and community pride. But they had no idea what was truly happening. Beneath their optimism and misplaced faith, a financial sinkhole was forming. Karen was spending HOA funds with reckless abandon. Tens of thousands of dollars vanished with each passing week, funneled into private contractor fees, high-end materials, and backdoor deals with Silver Lake Holdings. And while Karen and her board preened in the limelight, congratulating themselves at every turn, I was quietly setting a legal trap. My lawyer, David, worked with me behind the scenes to draft an airtight lawsuit. Not just against the HOA, but against every board member individually. We named them for trespassing, willful property destruction, fraudulent permits, forgery, and misappropriation of community funds. It was a nuclear-grade legal package, and I hadn't even fired the first shot. Before we launched our case, I wanted to weaken Karen's base of support. So, I began leaking pieces of information, documents, photos, whistleblower tips, to select members of the neighborhood. People I trusted. People who had no idea they were funding a private real estate scam with their monthly HOA fees. The reaction was instant. Neighbors who had blindly supported the bridge began asking questions. They started pulling records, attending meetings, whispering in driveways. The facade was cracking, and the pressure was building. Then came the moment that tipped it all over. It started with a simple email. A whistleblower from inside Silver Lake Holdings sent me a message. It was brief, but devastating. 2 lines: project is running over budget. HOA board is about to raise fees. Emergency vote pending. That was all I needed. Karen had pushed the project too far, too fast. She had drained the budget dry, and now she was about to make a fatal error. She was going to raise HOA dues to keep the bridge project afloat. I made sure to attend the next HOA meeting in person. I sat silently near the back, arms crossed, waiting to watch it all fall apart. Karen entered the room with her usual smug confidence, strutting to the head of the table like a queen ready to address her court. "Thank you for coming," she began. "Before we begin, I'd like to thank everyone for their support in making our new community bridge a reality. As you've seen, construction is ahead of schedule. In just a few short weeks, we'll have a stunning new landmark that will increase property values for us all." A few scattered claps, but most faces were stiff, unreadable. The crowd wasn't buying it anymore. Then came the bombshell. Due to unforeseen construction costs, Karen announced, the board has voted to implement a slight increase in HOA dues to ensure the bridge's completion. Gasps. Murmurs. Then a loud voice from the middle of the room. "How much?" Karen gave a rehearsed smile, brushing off the concern. "Just a modest adjustment. A small increase of $150 per household, effective immediately." That was it. The room erupted. People stood up. Shouting began. "You said it was budgeted," one woman cried. "Why are we paying for this?" yelled a man near the front. Karen's expression faltered for the first time. "This is a long-term investment in our community," she argued. "Your property values will skyrocket," but no one was listening. The illusion had shattered. And I leaned back and smiled. It was almost time. I waited a few more days, just enough time for the outrage to stew, for neighbors to talk, for trust in the board to erode completely. Then I made my move. The final blow. The next HOA meeting was standing room only. Every chair in the community center was filled. People lined the walls. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. Karen, still trying to play the part of benevolent leader, took her seat at the head of the table. She looked confident. Too confident. She had no idea what was about to hit her. I stood quietly in the back, clutching a thick folder filled with weeks of evidence. When Karen opened the meeting, thanking everyone for their continued support, I raised my hand. Then, without waiting for permission, I stepped forward. Actually, Karen, I said, my voice echoing through the room, before you continue patting yourself on the back, I think we need to address something very serious. Her eyes narrowed. Mr. Carter, she said, forcing a smile, if you have a concern, we'd be happy to address it at the appropriate time. I walked to the front. The appropriate time is now. I dropped the folder on the table. Every eye in the room followed it. This, I said, flipping open the first document, is the official zoning record from the county. I turned to the projector and displayed the document. As you can all see, my property has never, let me repeat, never been under HOA jurisdiction. Gasps. Whispers. Karen looked like she'd been slapped. I continued, flipping to the next page. This is the construction permit submitted to the county. You'll notice my name, supposedly granting approval. The problem? I never signed it. Another wave of shock passed through the room. I turned to Karen, whose face had gone pale. That's fraud, Karen. And I wasn't done. I pulled up the next file, bank records and HOA transaction logs. If you're wondering why this bridge project was rushed, it's because it wasn't for the community. It was for profit. I clicked to the next screen. Silver Lake Holdings, the development firm contracted to expand infrastructure past the bridge, is run by Richard Reynolds, Karen's husband. Gasps turned into shouts. He's been funneling HOA money into his company. While you've all been paying increased fees, the room erupted with another scream directed at Karen. Her face had gone pale, but she struggled to maintain control. These are baseless accusations, she snapped, voice trembling with anger. This is a personal attack from someone who's always been difficult. Mr. Carter has opposed this project from the very beginning, and now he's fabricating lies to sabotage it. I laughed, a cold, humorless sound that cut through the tension like a knife. Fabricating? I repeated, leaning forward so my words hit like a sledgehammer. Funny, because I've already sent all this evidence to my lawyer. It's now with the county prosecutor's office. The room fell silent. Board members shifted uncomfortably, some avoided Karen's glare, sensing the tide turning against her. But I wasn't done. Let me be very clear, I said, voice steady and firm. Every single board member who voted for this project is complicit. The HOA illegally seized land, falsified documents, and misused community funds for personal gain. That means you're all on the hook, unless you act now to distance yourselves from Karen and this fraud before the county comes knocking. Karen slammed her hands on the table, voice cracking as she shouted, "You have no authority here. This meeting is over." I shook my head. No, Karen. I flipped open my folder and placed one last document on the table. It's over for you. I watched her expression crumble as I revealed the official cease and desist order from the county, halting all construction on the bridge. The county has shut the project down. The bridge is condemned. Built on stolen land, and it's coming down. Karen's eyes darted around the room, wild and desperate, but control had slipped through her fingers. Homeowners, once blindly loyal, now demanded resignations, refunds, and legal action. Board members scrambled to distance themselves, abandoning her sinking ship. Karen's empire of lies was unraveling in real time. Then I delivered the final blow, savoring every second. Oh, and one last thing. I smiled coldly. Since the HOA spent hundreds of thousands building a bridge on land it doesn't own, it has no legal claim to it. Which means I'm free to do whatever I want with it. Karen's face went white as the horror sank in. What are you saying? Someone in the crowd stammered. I nodded toward the county officials in the back. I just sold the land, and the bridge with it. The stunned silence lasted barely 3 seconds before chaos exploded. Voices shouted over one another, disbelief and anger flooding the room. You sold the land, a man near the front yelled, face flushed red. You can't just do that, another screamed. Karen, frozen and pale, stared at me as if I had obliterated her entire world, which, in truth, I had. I let the clamor rise for a few more moments before raising my hand for silence. I assure you, I absolutely can, and I did. The sale was finalized this morning. I pulled out the official, county-certified sale documents and held them up for everyone to see. The county has been trying to purchase this land for years to develop public infrastructure, I explained. Thanks to your little bridge project, the land's value skyrocketed. I sold it for millions. Karen jumped to her feet, slamming her hands on the table, finally finding her voice. You can't do that. That bridge is a community project, the HOA funded it, so it belongs to us. I tilted my head, feigning sympathy. You really don't understand how property law works, do you? You can't build something on land you don't own and then claim it's yours. That's not how this works. I gestured to the homeowners. The money you all paid? Gone. Spent on a project the HOA never had the legal right to build. Now the county owns it, and you have no right to use it. Not now. Not ever. A woman gasped, You mean we can't use the bridge at all? I nodded. It's under county jurisdiction now. The HOA, and everyone who voted for this disaster, wasted every cent they spent. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Furious homeowners shouted accusations at Karen: fraud, lies, betrayal. You told us this would raise our property values, one yelled. You lied to us, screamed another. Karen tried to regain control, shouting above the noise, everyone calm down. This is just a misunderstanding. We'll get a legal team involved, we can fight this. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that made her flinch. Fight this? With what money, Karen? Your HOA is already in financial ruin. You drained the reserve fund. You planned fee hikes to cover the cost, and now you've lost everything. You're legally barred from using the bridge, and you're about to face multiple lawsuits. I turned to the crowd. Honestly, how many of you will sue the HOA for fraud now that you know the truth? A murmur spread. People started pulling out phones, whispering, calling lawyers. Karen's face went deathly pale. She looked to the rest of the board for support, but they all stepped back. Jeff, the HOA's vice president and one of her loudest supporters, shook his head. I didn't know about any of this, he said. You signed the documents, Karen. This is on you. Desperation crept into Karen's voice as she hissed at me, You're lying. You're just trying to humiliate me. The county wouldn't just take the bridge away. They can't. I raised an eyebrow, holding up another document. Oh, but they can. I revealed the official eviction notice, signed by the county, effective immediately. The HOA is barred from accessing the bridge. Any attempt to use, maintain, or alter it will be trespassing on government property. I let that sink in, then added, and since I gave the county security footage proving the bridge was built on private land without authorization, I suggest you tell your contractors to clear out before arrests start. Karen opened her mouth to argue, but her phone rang. She snatched it up, listened, and then her face drained of color entirely. Karen's face drained of all color. I could tell exactly what was happening. Someone from her office had just informed her that the construction crews were being ordered off the site. The bridge was no longer under HOA control, and there was nothing she could do about it. I watched the fight drain from her eyes as her body slumped, the crushing weight of failure finally sinking in. She turned to the crowd, but this time there was no one left to support her. The room erupted with shouts demanding her resignation, refunds, and legal action. Her empire had crumbled overnight, with no hope of revival. I stepped back, letting the chaos unfold. Board members scrambled to distance themselves while homeowners quickly organized a legal case against the HOA. Karen stood frozen in the middle of it all, her career and reputation collapsing like a house of cards. I had done exactly what I set out to do. I'd let them dig their own grave, and when the moment was right, I'd shove them straight into it. The meeting ended with the homeowners calling for an emergency vote to dissolve the HOA completely. Karen didn't even resist. She left quietly, head down, phone clutched in trembling hands. The rest of the board followed soon after, abandoning a room full of furious people finally free from years of dictatorship. As I stepped out into the night, I took one last look at the bridge, the monument to their greed and arrogance that had brought about their downfall. Then, as if the universe wanted to grant me one final touch of poetic justice, I saw it, a new sign at the bridge entrance, bold and bright. Crossing $5, with asterisks. I shook my head, chuckling as I walked away. The same people who had fought tooth and nail for that bridge, who had lied, scammed, and stolen to make it happen, would now have to pay every time they crossed it. I had won. Completely. Utterly. And the best part? I was now millions of dollars richer, all thanks to their own greed. The fallout hit the HOA hard and fast. The moment I walked out of that meeting, the neighborhood exploded with legal threats, refund demands, and pure rage. The people who had blindly supported Karen's regime suddenly saw the truth: they'd been funding a corrupt system funneling their money into a project they'd never get to use. That very night, multiple group chats and email threads buzzed with furious homeowners organizing lawsuits, petitions, and calling lawyers to assess their options. By morning, social media posts from neighbors were slamming the HOA, exposing the fraud, and demanding resignations. It was like watching a slow-motion collapse. Those who once defended Karen, nodding along to her lies, now called for her head. Karen, arrogant to the last, had no defense. The financial fraud was undeniable, every dollar funneled into her husband's shady development firm was documented. The homeowners banded together and filed a class action lawsuit accusing the HOA of fund misuse, document falsification, and gross negligence. Unlike Karen, these people had real standing, they had paper trails, receipts, and the numbers to turn this into a legal nightmare. The lawsuit gained momentum quickly. Board members began to abandon ship. The HOA vice president resigned within 2 days, claiming ignorance, despite his name being on half the approvals. One by one, the rest followed, desperate to wash their hands of the disaster. But it didn't matter, they were all complicit. Karen was hit the hardest. The lawsuit triggered an in-depth investigation of her finances. Forensic accountants uncovered years of financial manipulation, unauthorized transactions, and even HOA funds spent on personal luxuries, vacations, home renovations, and, hilariously, a membership to an exclusive country club. The authorities moved swiftly. Within a month, Karen was officially charged with fraud, misappropriation of funds, and multiple counts of document forgery. The scandal spread like wildfire. The whole county buzzed with the downfall of the once powerful HOA president. The best part? The HOA itself didn't survive the storm. With lawsuits piling up and the reserve fund drained, it was financially doomed. Furious homeowners, desperate to erase every trace of Karen's rule, voted overwhelmingly to dissolve the HOA. The legal process took weeks, but eventually, the HOA, once the iron fist controlling every detail of neighborhood life, was no more. The ridiculous rules, fines, and invasive inspections vanished. The residents were finally free. And me? I watched it all from my brand new beachfront property. Once my sale to the county was finalized, I wasted no time escaping HOA-controlled neighborhoods. With my multi-million-dollar payout, I bought a stunning coastal home with a private dock, no HOA, and zero nosy neighbors telling me what color I could paint my house or what kind of mailbox I could have. Every morning, I woke to the sound of waves instead of HOA violation notices. Every evening, I sipped my drink on the deck, savoring not just my victory, but the utter dismantling of those who tried to steal from me. And the final nail in the coffin? The county didn't tear the bridge down, they monetized it. Within weeks, toll booths were installed at both ends. The very people who fought so hard for the bridge, who paid their dues to fund it, and blindly followed Karen, now had to pay $5 every time they crossed. It wasn't much, but it was a constant reminder of their mistake. I heard through the grapevine that former HOA members were furious about the toll, but with no legal grounds to contest it, the county had made sure of that. Karen's luxury development plan, her and her husband's dream, crumbled without access through the bridge. Investors pulled out, contracts collapsed, and the entire expansion project died. Her husband, Richard Reynolds, whose career was built on shady HOA deals, was investigated. Developers blacklisted him. Lawsuits piled up, forcing him into bankruptcy. I never saw Karen again after that final meeting. Last I heard, she'd moved away in disgrace. Her reputation was ruined, her former loyal followers openly despised her. And honestly, that was fine by me. I had no interest in ever seeing her again. I had won, completely, utterly, and without doubt. So as I sat on my deck watching the sun dip below the ocean, I couldn't help but smile. I'd turned their greed against them. Let them build a monument to their arrogance, let them think they'd outplayed me. Then, when the time was right, I pulled the rug out from under them so hard they never recovered. They tried to steal from me, but in the end, they were the ones who lost everything.